Well, welcome back to the Heartland Leadership Podcast, a podcast all about leadership and the way of Jesus. My name's Clint. So a number of our people that come to the church and our staff have been enrolling in seminary recently. And it just got me thinking about just communicating to our whole church and whoever happens to be listening on YouTube, why would someone pursue theological education? And typically that's been called seminary. These different outfits offer degrees, training for future pastors and others who want to learn more about their faith, about the Bible. That's kind of the typical quick way to describe seminary. So where to start?
Seminary's kind of been like post-bachelor degree, right? You would go to receive higher education, higher theological education, and it's always
theological education, you might say.
Yeah. And it's this, like, it's always had, I believe anyway, like this stigma of, you talking seminary or cemetery?
Right.
Because like...
Yeah, describe... What do you mean by that?
Like when I was growing up, it was, if you go to seminary, it will kill your faith.
Yeah, it's almost like just someone who's real excited about Jesus starts to feel, oh man, is there something for me in ministry, whatever that might be. But then here's where you go and you're told, hey, you got to read all these dried up dead guys, and you got to learn Hebrew and Greek, even though you may never have met someone who speaks Hebrew or Greek.
And I was told they will do their best to talk you out of your faith. Like, this is interesting. Like, really? I'm going to go to a place where I want to learn more about Jesus and increase my faith, and they're going to try to talk me out of it? So, like, for me, it was always
that was the conception from people warning you to not go there. But was that your experience?
No, not at all. Not at all. Anything but. But when I was... It was a long time ago. I'm 54, right? But I mean, you would have to leave where you lived, and you'd have to pack everything up, and you'd have to move like to a whole new town to go to seminary, and you'd have to rent an apartment and get a part-time job. I mean, it was a whole deal, and yeah, things have drastically changed. They were changing for me at the time. Mm-hmm. So,
would you call what you did theological education? And
oh yeah, absolutely.
Why?
Well, because we learned about God, so in the most general sense of the term theological, theos is the word God, logical, like a word about. So we're going to study words about God. We're going to learn about God together. And that's what happened, at least in my seminary experience. I did a Bible school, you might say undergrad. So I learned a little bit of the languages and things like that. And then I went away and started a job in a church and started doing seminary kind of part-time. So I would take a class a week for a while. We actually lived in Wisconsin at the time, and I would drive down to Milwaukee where there was an extension of this particular seminary, and we'd go there for like 3 hours I think it was Thursday night, and you'd be in a classroom with other seminarians, but like then I would drive back to my home and work my 40-hour job in ministry. So it was like a combination of that. And did the same thing then when we moved back here to Ohio, very similar thing. Started going to seminary, still working a job, but I was learning. At least for me, this was the big difference. Like I was learning from practitioners, people who were actually doing it. So like we would go, I think it was Elmbrook Church is where I went in Milwaukee. Was that Stuart Briscoe? Yeah, Stuart Briscoe. It's probably before your time.
I know guys who came from that church who I was like in the hall with when I was at school. It's so funny. Yeah.
So we would the guys who would be teaching the classes were pastors in the church. So like Mel Lorenz, who I think ended up being one of the lead pastors, and Barry Beitzel would teach classes. These were like incredible like theological leaders, thought thinkers of the day, and it was great to learn from them, but they were actually doing the work of ministry. They weren't just teaching. Does that make sense?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, do you think that's probably not the case for most seminaries, right? They're professors that are...
Yes, right.
And maybe they worked in a church, but that wouldn't really come up in
these guys were full-time working in churches, and they were like part-time adjuncting at the seminary.
I see.
And then it was the same thing when I finished my seminary, because I went to 3 different seminaries. So I started off at, I have this running theme in my life, right? I started off at Trinity out of Chicago. Then we went, well, I guess it was the same one. Then when I was in Akron, I was at the chapel, but it was a Trinity. I ended up graduating from Western Seminary, which is out in Portland, Oregon. But I got my degree through in Sacramento at Bayside Church, which is a big church there. And again, it was pastors, it was people who were doing the ministry. So it was very hands-on, and they were larger churches that I was learning from. So it was, I thought my seminary experience was excellent. But to your point, like most seminaries, these guys have been tenured, they've been there for years, probably aren't even working in the church anymore, and just like completely, a lot of them really out of date.
Yeah, and I think that's significant what you just said about how even in your day, in your experience, seminary was already changing a bit. Because I think about my dad, who would have been in seminary 15 to 20 years before you. And at least when he talks about it, it feels much more to me that more of his options would have been that, yes, you go, pack up your life, move there, learn from those professors whose full-time job is they are in the classroom, not so much this extension campus model or this more accessible model. I mean, you kind of had to put your life on hold.
Absolutely.
And for my parents, it was sort of a scraping by. My mom got a job in, I believe, the office at the seminary because she could make some money there. You know, you maybe find a local church that's looking for a part-time something or other pastor, so you can eke some coins.
That's not going to pay you anything.
No, totally.
Right.
But you're trying to make it work because this is the training that you likely need before you go and take a pastorate at a church.
That's what I want to dial in on. So that training. So in other fields, the guild has come up with certain standards of excellence that you have to pass. So you have to get a certain score on your MCAT if you're going to get into a good medical school.
Right.
And you need to pass your certain bar exams or whatever for being a lawyer. And so like the community of lawyers and people in law have kind of come up with what should the bar be and for all these different kind of, higher order professions, let's say. And there is kind of a standard body of knowledge that like, hey man, if you're going to be a doctor, you've got to know anatomy.
It would make sense.
For crying out loud. And a number of other things. If you're going to specialize, whatever you're going to end up doing, you need to know these things and take apart a cadaver or different activities you do in med school. Okay, so what is that training that's required to become, let's say, a good pastor? And then is that what has been traditionally offered at seminaries?
It's funny you bring this up because church world is so much different. There are many churches, and I learned this just as I was growing in ministry, but like there are many churches that the pastor or people in their church, they'll say like, well, we got our degree, or I went to seminary, and I'll ask them, well, where from? And it's like through their church. It's like by taking classes from the pastor or from somebody else in their own church, which isn't accredited at all, but like their church sees it as the governing body and what's necessary. And so they have the credentials to do. And it got me thinking about, okay, like
and so they would say they have a...
They have said to me.
Like the most common
one. But they have a seminary education, or they actually have a master's degree?
Well, they wouldn't say master's degree. They would say...
But it might be close. Like the one I've bumped into a bunch of times is like because of accreditation, because of some of the rules, you can't technically say, well, this is a master's, but like you might call it a master's of ministry.
Right, there you go.
It's not really saying M. something, but it's saying, hey, this is what we called at our denominational school, our ministry school, a master's of ministry. And so it's really tricky, to your point. Similar with ordination, frankly. Ordination could mean so many things. And likewise, when you dig in with other pastors, you might find, that master's, that's very different than what I did. I don't want to pick on certain seminaries, but like a master's degree from like a seminary that you would think of as prestigious doesn't necessarily mean they studied the same thing as more of an evangelical, and I don't even love that word, but seminary. And so the governing body that accredits seminaries that I'm aware, there's probably a few of them, but like is ATS, the Association of Theological Schools.
Association,
like would Bob Jones University offer it's a seminary as well, right?
I'm
Surely?
not.
I couldn't speak to that either.
Yeah, I
I'm
can't
sorry.
speak
But
to
like,
that.
let's just say that they do have one. That would be a far cry in a lot of ways from like Harvard School
Oh
of
my
Divinity.
goodness.
That's kind of what I'm
night
saying.
and day,
Night and
right?
day.
Yeah.
Whole different curriculum,
Right,
perhaps.
whole different curriculum. So like that's why when people ask me, well, I want to get a theological education. Well, you not only have to think about what kind of education you want, but like what you want to do, what kind of church you want to serve afterwards. For instance, there are some denominations, if you don't graduate from their prescribed seminary, they'll never hire you in their church. You know, I was just having a conversation with.
And why, like, drill down, why is that? What
Because there are certain things that they
doctrines?
certain teachings that they, maybe not even doctrines, but like certain parts of history, certain teachings that they think you've got to know this.
Or even a practical one, like, and this is a healthy one, I think. I don't know what it stands for, but like CPE, is that clinical pastoral experience?
Education.
Yeah. So like CPE, which kind of has some shared values with like chaplaincy, going to visit hospital visitations, crisis care. Some denominations, some churches would say you have to have CPE. And so our schools that we sort of allow for, recognize, they will make you take CPE. Whereas another school might say, no, you can get your Master's of Divinity without CPE. And so there could be things like that, not just doctrine. If you
All
will.
that to say, I believe accreditation is important because it is that body of governing authority that you mentioned earlier. Now, is it everything? Well, no, it's not everything. Like, I would love that people want to know more about their faith and whatever their church is offering. Great, take that step. But like, if you want to reach that level, there's a certain level that accreditation
And you
speaks
name
to.
dropped ATS, Association of Theological Schools.
We think.
Yeah, I believe that's what
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
And how do you know the details of that? Is it similar to these other guilds and other professions? Like,
Yes,
there's
like-
a community of schools that have all come together, and they have maybe some members on the council that makes determinations of, we are saying, yes, we're affirming the education that this institution's offering.
That's right. Yep. And there are certain prerequisites that you have to study and you have to pass, and the school gets interviewed on a regular basis to make sure that they are adhering to these principles. So it's a big deal.
And if I could chime in on what you said about accreditation mattering, not to introduce anything dark to this conversation, but unfortunately I am aware of a few people who went to sort of schools of ministry, or that's what I've heard more often than seminary, but where frankly there was no accreditation, there was no outside board of accountability, and honestly individuals were using that school and that sort of platform opportunity to exercise power in an inappropriate way.
Wow.
And I mean, I know multiple stories of that happening. And so just like anything where you're giving yourself to a larger body of power, you sort of want to know that those leaders are accountable to something. I think there's wisdom
I
there.
don't want to come across like we're the ATS snobs or accreditation snobs,
No.
but like we're not. But it is important, like Drew's mentioning, to know what you're getting into and what you want to get out of it, and that it's been approved and vetted by a larger source.
I guess like back more to the more higher level general questions that people listening might be asking, like, why? I don't know. Why even do any of that? Like,
Right.
Can't I get the training I would need to be a good pastor just by like studying under the pastor I have now? I have a good pastor, and I kind of study him, and I meet with him or her and try to emulate what they're doing, and then I could be a good pastor. Why do I have to spend $40,000 or whatever it is over the course of however long and move my whole family? Why do any of that?
And in some seminaries, $40,000 a year. You know, I mean, think about that. That's a lot of money. It's a big investment, which is part of the reason why I got frustrated. When I was finishing my doctorate degree, now it's doctorate level, right? But like one class that I was taking, and I won't mention the organization, but it was $5,000. And it just hit me like, I can't sustain this, It was great. I mean, I had great experiences with it, but wow, I'm not ever going to have a job making $250,000 a year where I can pay off this debt. So I had to back away from that, find a different source. And I do think, I mean, it's expensive, but I do think why? To to me, it's like discipleship. It's growing and learning more about Christ. And it's not just pastors or missionaries that should go to seminary. I think it should be open to anyone who wants to learn and grow. And I'll be honest, like after 30 now years as a pastor, I can't provide that same level, even if someone was in my dust following me around as their rabbi. Like I can't teach them all the things that were taught to me at seminary.
And I do think like we wouldn't totally want to poo-poo that idea. Like, there is something to be gained by getting with your pastor. I think the contextual work of, okay, in this community that we're both a part of with the unique challenges that maybe we're both familiar with, there's totally a wisdom there, I think.
Yes.
But I think the flip side of that, and certainly some pastors and some traditions would encourage this more than others, is your pastor, no matter how gifted they are, is human, has limitations, has been exposed to a certain body of work, a number of communities and experiences. And so I do think one of the things when you go to a recognized institution that offers theological education is you are trying to expose yourself to something wider and bigger. And that both is connecting you hopefully to the global Christian community, that there are people studying the scriptures, thinking about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, what it means to come together as church, how to organize in different ways because of their context. There's also different eras. And so we can oftentimes look back at frankly, individuals who maybe aren't a part of our tradition, maybe lived 500 years before we did. And a lot of times seminary will sort of just open your mind. It certainly did for me to, wow, there's so much that even if, I was working here with you, even if I did follow you around or read everything on your bookshelf,
right.
There's just a lot more to it than that.
So do you think there's anything, so that sounds good on paper. Is part of that experience why some might look from the outside looking in, say you've lost your faith or some of the vibrancy or vigor that maybe you went to seminary for? Is there anything about that experience that, like, why does it have that reputation?
Oh,
there's a nugget of truth in
seminary being a cemetery.
Yeah.
Well, there is a certain rigor to seminary that I think is good and productive. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's like, this is a silly example, but like, let's just pretend in your marriage, if you're married, you love your wife, you love your husband. Now, what if someone said, hey, for this next 3-year period of your life, I want you to focus more on just doing ethnographic research with your wife and writing lengthy papers about your wife, and make sure that your formatting and your sources is all done correctly. And hey, I'm going to slap some deadlines on there. And then, hey, even if you pour your heart and soul into this, I'm going to ask someone outside of your marriage to come in and evaluate for you, how well did you speak to this person? And so you take this like intensely personal and potentially vibrant thing, I think, and you turn it a little bit more into, something that has all these criteria. And so I think that depersonalization is truly one of the risks, especially, I think, in the study of Scripture. Because, at least in my experience, when I went to seminary, I was taught some new methods for studying Scripture. And some of them felt really foreign and kind of like using tools that I had never used before. And now what was sometimes this, hey, let me open this and see, what is God saying to me? Now I struggle to do that because I'm thinking about, well, I kind of have to leave this tool on the wall in order to do that. But seminary is saying you got to learn to use this tool. So that's some of what comes to my mind is this.
Yeah, and I think what I was mentioning before, there's a rigor which is good, but there's also like in a typical seminary, there's the danger of it just becomes all head knowledge, and it becomes being taught by the so-called experts who have been doing it for years but aren't in the field. And so there is that danger, I think.
Almost that's a better way of what I was trying to say. Like, almost like if your wife came to you and said, hey, I'm not impressed by your paper about 15 great dates you could have with your wife. Like, how about one? Get your head out of the book. Stop writing the paper. Let's live it and not just talk about it.
Take your wife on the date.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to name a little bit.
So like in my seminary experience, And I think this is what I would want from people that go to seminary. And it's not just pastors or missionaries. For me, it's anyone who wants to be discipled and learn and grow in their faith. But here's what I would want. I would want them, number one, and most importantly, falling more in love with Jesus. Mm-hmm. That's by far, right? Number two, this is very important. I want them to know what they can't know. Mm-hmm. I want them to understand that there's a mystery, and the longer and deeper they study something, the more questions they'll have. Mm-hmm. Love that. Number three, I want them to be resourced. I want them to have connections, both personal, books, online. I want them to know where to go to solve those problems, right? And what I would add, and probably the thing that I didn't get as much, and maybe this is my fault, is this fourth one of just like, there's a whole lot that you don't learn in seminary about people and about relationships and how they work. And you can call that counseling or, sociology or whatever, but like I didn't get a lot of that, and I use that every single day. So I had to learn as I went. I guess I would rather have less Hebrew and Greek and a little more like, how do you work through conflict,
Right.
Or how do you set up a budget in a church, or how do you train leaders? Like those are things I still never learned in seminary.
You're putting your finger on a tension many seminaries are feeling though as well, because for example, if you're hearing that feedback, do you now add another year or two of seminary for that? Yeah. Or do you instead say, do we have to trim some of the Hebrew and Greek? And when you do that, then, you get into this big kind of weighing game of what.
But let me say this. This is interesting. I heard somebody say, maybe you can speak to this, Clint. Like somebody said that when somebody's graduating from medical school, they were told like by the time, or when they started medical school, by the time you graduate from medical school, half of what you learned won't be applicable anymore. And I would say that's also true for seminary. Like I was studying Hebrew and Greek and all these different, the syntax and the words and the blah, blah. And now we go to the internet. Well, they didn't have the internet when I was in seminary. Mm-hmm. Now you Google, what does this word mean, right? And boom, it pops up. So like all that work, all that study, I think there's certain things that will never fall, out. But there are others that, man, I think I wasted some time there, which is why, and maybe I'm turning the corner here, why I'm so impressed with this program from Sioux Falls that we've gotten involved with here at Heartland, is particularly, Drew. I mean, I graduated with my doctorate. Drew's graduated with his Master's of Divinity, and it's been just eye-opening for us on lots of different occasions. We have staff people involved, and this is what I love, we also have people from our congregation who are working 9-to-5 jobs or own businesses that are also involved in this seminary experience, and it has been awesome to see what God's been doing so far with that. Yeah.
I liked at one moment, it might have been you, Drew, who or Dave made synonymous, kind of said theological education or something is just a discipleship journey.
Yes.
I like thinking of it that way as well, like an intentional, a little bit more formal season of discipleship.
Yes.
Is theological education. And that is really what I think Kairos offers. And just as you were sharing about...
Kairos is the Sioux Falls Seminary. It's now what? Kairos University, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that what they call it now?
Okay. Is that is it its own thing now?
Yeah, it's its own thing now. And it's gotten bigger and bigger. And just to set the stage for this a minute, Clint, so we talk, we've talked before on the podcast about discipleship being our REI. Discipleship should be relationships, should be about experiencing the E, God for yourself, and then the I, like information that you need to know God better and deeper. I see this Kairos thing as like an intense version of the I. Like you're going to learn things that you just can't possibly learn anywhere else. And it's eye-opening for a lot of people.
Now, I think what is going to take a bit more convincing for some listening, I mean, I would guess most of our listeners are not in paid ministry.
That's safe to say.
So when you said like it's not just for pastors or people that work at a church, it's for everyone. Can you try to make that land home a little bit more as to why? Yeah. So let's say I'm a plumber. Okay. And I attend this church or maybe some other one if you happen to be tuning in. And what need have I to do such a thing.
Well, so that's fair.
But I think you're right, and I want to bring it out of you.
Here's
why should that person?
I guess I'm saying maybe it's not for everyone, but it should be for everyone who has a desire to grow in their faith and to learn what it really means to follow Jesus. Those are the everyone I'm talking about.
Okay.
So like that plumber example who works the 9 to 5, but goes to a church, maybe is part of a church, maybe is serving or not serving in a church, and he or she just wants to grow more into the image of Christ, to know Jesus more. Like, yes, your involvement in your church is good. And even here at Heartland, like we've got classes that you teach, or we all have taught, that will help people understand. But then there's this other level that I think comes with a seminary experience. Mm-hmm. And some of that is what we've talked about already, with the rigor of it, you got to give yourself to this. Frankly, you have to pay for it. And there's a certain ownership involved in that as well. And I've just seen really great results from it. So that person wanting to grow in their faith, wanting to become more like Christ, that's the person I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think what comes to my mind as a perspective shift for me in the past number of years, and thankfully a program like Kairos is a bit more affordable than traditional seminary was in the past.
It's a ton more affordable.
Yes. Yeah, I'm maybe not emphasizing that enough, but where I think it changes the conversation a little bit is, we would say to someone around discipleship, just in general, forget about seminary for a moment, be paying attention to what you feel the Spirit is maybe doing in your life. Where is the Holy Spirit maybe using Scripture to lead you, to shape you, or relationships or conversations or experiences? And I think 10 years ago, I would have said, well, yeah, but just kind of a person not looking to go into pastoral ministry, the Spirit wouldn't send them to seminary. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of time. And with theological education becoming more affordable and more accessible, I've just realized that's kind of a false barrier to put up. I mean, this could be one avenue that the Spirit might point someone to go after that theological education, to go after discipleship.
It's funny. I'm having a bit of an aha as I'm sitting here. When we say to someone, you should go to seminary, most people think what? Just, your plumber example.
Yeah,
they think,
I'm going to learn more about the Bible.
And why do I need to go to seminary? That's for pastors and missionaries. Maybe even instead of us talking about this as go to seminary, we should be talking about it as, hey, you should get involved in our Kairos discipleship experience.
Exactly, yeah. Intentional discipleship for this season. And when you were saying earlier about maybe some things from the traditional curriculum getting squeezed out for some other important things that would have really helped you, I think what Kairos is doing, particularly now moving forward, and we just had the president in to chat to our students. He's been on the podcast before, so you check back. I forget which episode it is. We'll have it in the show notes, but you can click that and hear from the horse's mouth his vision for it. But really, it's okay, so Joe is a plumber, and yeah, man, where do you want to see your spiritual life in 3 years? Mm-hmm. And we can custom tailor your discipleship. Forget the word seminary.
Forget it.
Theological education sounds too daunting.
Your
discipleship journey. What kind of person do you want to be at the end of 3 years? That's something we should all be asking in any church. And you can go to Clint's little class. Yeah. You should be attending a local body and all these. But here are faculty and people in your life mentor you in this particular program.
Yep.
And they're asking you questions like, well, what do you want to be like? Well, and maybe you say as a plumber, I meet a lot of different people. I want to be a witness of Jesus as I go and move about my day. And I don't really know how to interact with someone when they say they're an atheist or of a different faith. So I want to be the kind of person that can interact with people from different perspectives.
I want to be equipped for that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you're naming, and I am in pastoral ministry at this church, but that was my experience. So, I came out of Cedarville with a major in Bible, or an undergraduate degree, bachelor's in Bible. And just to be frank, I was plenty happy to have a couple years out of the classroom and just to kind of be with students and their families here. But around the time when we became aware of this program, and this was years back, and it's continued to evolve, and I think only gotten stronger, I was starting to feel this hunger again of I would like to be growing. I would like to be stretching myself kind of in that I component more than I have been. I'd been doing a lot of R&E, and it was wonderful. But I was starting to feel that hunger come back, and it kind of hit me. Okay, so maybe this is an opportunity, and it's affordable, which is amazing, because otherwise I probably couldn't have stepped into it at that time, to both submit a little bit to an institution that is invested in theological education. They're going to shape some things. They're going to provide some mentorship. They're going to offer me some tools, some resources. But also, I was drawn to the fact that I would have some say in it, because I knew that either way, whether I enrolled in seminary or not, over that next couple year period, I wanted to grow. I felt God putting some hunger in me. And so realizing that could take place within this structure where I'd have help, resources, was huge. And over the course of my time in it, and I think this is what we want to see from more and more students, yes, I right now am working within vocational ministry. It is how I care for my family. It's how I provide. It is important for me to have a degree in my situation. But honestly, even without the degree, I can genuinely say that the theological training I received as a part of the Kairos program and through Sioux Falls University changed the trajectory of my relationship with God. It changed the way I see faith. It changes the way I parent and the way I seek to be a neighbor. And so I am thankful for it, irregardless of a piece of paper that says I earned a Master of Divinity.
And we keep saying how affordable it is. I think it's $300 a month, I believe.
We won't put Drew on the spot to
Right.
calculate it.
But $300 a month and a master's degree, not that the degree is your goal, but if it was, can be attained in 2 to 3 years. So you're talking like a master's degree for about $10,000 out of, while you're working in your home, in your context, doing ministry with like people that will stretch you and love you and also push you. It's a tremendous opportunity.
In a cutting edge kind of philosophy of education where you get out of it exactly what you want to get out of it.
Yes. Yeah. Now, okay, you bring up a good point, because on things that can be had as well. But I
that describes a lot of stuff. That's how working out sometimes is for me.
Or maybe other seminaries, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was the recent realization to me when we had that time with Greg, the president, recently, is that, oh my goodness, he's so right that like I got an A or A- in biology in college. I don't remember one thing from my biology class. And so if I really wanted to be transformed by that learning, I would have had to put more into it.
Learning beyond information transfer, just acquiring more data. Because to your point, we live in the internet age. I don't need to like be hyper focused on becoming a human Rolodex encyclopedia,
right.
Knowing how to find information, and more importantly, what Kairos is doing, the character. Who am I becoming?
Yeah.
Yes,
and my
that's
craft.
huge.
How am I going about the work God's called me to do?
Right.
Is just as integral as the information, the content.
Yeah.
you'll
Now,
be
what you got to
exploring.
be prepared for is it's so different from a normal way of thinking about education. There's not this list or this checkbox, or it's not that at all, and you just got to get that out of your mind completely.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a perfect analogy, but I think of like sometimes you might say to someone, well, wouldn't you love to be your own boss? And some people are like, yes, I would love to be my own boss. And others find pretty quickly when they have the opportunity, oh, this isn't great, because if I don't have someone holding me to a deadline, I won't do it. And now that I'm the one having to motivate myself every day, I don't find it rewarding. And so it is similarly, it's going to push some of those things in you of what do you want?
And with all that said, we should circle back and say, and this program is not only like endorsed by ATS. I can't think of the other one now, but there's another body that also endorses it, and it's like at the top of that. So this is legit, man. It's not just Heartland saying, and by the way, there might be a Heartland College one day that works with Kairos. I mean, we're excited about this. Obviously, you can tell.
Yeah.
So my dream is not just like staff members or servant leaders being involved, but like people in our church, people from our community, and maybe even people from our community who don't know Jesus but just want to get a master's degree, and in the middle of it, they find Jesus. Like, how cool would that be if that were happening?
And I think just one thing, I think this is fair to say for the three of us, if it's not just tell me off right here, rebuke me strong on this St. Patty's Day. But I don't think we would want anyone listening to feel like And if you don't end up going to get your master's through Kairos,
That
like
you don't
you
care
are
about
less than.
discipleship?
No.
Good
But
point.
I think what we would want to say is be open to theological education as a part of your discipleship journey. It may be both more attainable and way more rewarding than you ever would have imagined.
And it's going to push you a little bit, you know. I mean, I hear some people say, well, I'm just going to stay at home and read and study myself. Great, you can do that. Or you can put yourself in an environment where there's people who think differently than you do and will challenge you on things. And guess what? In that process, man, you're going to learn and grow, and your faith is going to blossom in ways that you can't just do on your own, you know.
Well, any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
I mean, my only thing is, again, to Drew's point, I don't want to manipulate people or make them forced into anything, but this is a tremendous opportunity. We are on the cutting edge of it. There are other churches around the United States and Canada that are also doing this. I think you're just going to hear more and more and more about this model of education. So check it out, man. Can we link like a website to it?
Yeah, we'll have it in the show notes.
Yeah, sweet.
The way you can find out more.
Be great.
Well, thanks, guys, for sharing your heart on theological education and seminary and the whole deal. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Heartland Leadership Podcast. Again, we're on all the things. So anywhere you find audio podcasts, if you're watching on YouTube, so you can listen on your commutes, or if you're just on audio, you can tune in to YouTube and see the video version as well. So appreciate your support. Like, comment, subscribe, however it is that you can show us some support. Leave a review if you're on Apple. That'd be great. Helps it get in front of more eyeballs. We'll see you next time.